Introduction. There is a man alive right now who wakes up every single morning before the world demands anything of him. He does not reach for his phone. He does not turn on the television. He does not immediately flood his mind with the noise of someone else's opinion. Instead, he sits in the quiet. He breathes. He prepares. He thinks. And in those early, untouched moments of the day, he makes a decision that most men never make, the decision to forge himself before the world has the chance to break him. That man could be you. That man should be you. And if you have found your way to this video on the Stoic Edge, it is because something deep inside you already knows that there is a harder, sharper, more disciplined version of yourself waiting to be built. Today, we are going to talk about how to build him. The Stoics were not dreamers. They were not wishful thinkers who sat in golden temples spinning vague philosophies about the meaning of life. They were soldiers, emperors, slaves, businessmen, fathers, and leaders who understood that the life a man lives is built entirely from the habits he chooses to practice every single day. Marcus Aurelius did not become one of the greatest leaders in recorded human history by accident. Epictetus did not endure slavery and emerge as one of the most powerful teachers of the ancient world through luck. Seneca did not produce some of the most enduring wisdom in human history by chance. These men built themselves. Deliberately. Consistently. Habit by relentless habit, day by day, over the entire course of their lives. What separates a man who commands his life from a man who simply endures it is not intelligence. It is not privilege. It is not talent. It is the quality of what that man does when nobody is watching, in the private hours of his ordinary days. The Stoics called this praxis, the disciplined practice of virtue translated into daily action. And they were unapologetic about it. They believed, without reservation, that a man is exactly what his habits make him. Nothing more, nothing less. This is not a video about motivation. Motivation is a fire that burns hot for a few hours and then dies. This is a video about something that lasts, something that accumulates, something that builds a version of you that is unshakable, unflappable, and genuinely unstoppable in every arena of life. We are going to walk through 10 life-changing daily habits, rooted in the deep soil of Stoic philosophy, that will transform not just what you do but who you fundamentally are. These are not hacks. They are not shortcuts. They are the real, ancient, battle-tested practices of men who changed history by first changing themselves. If this kind of content speaks to something in your soul, do yourself one favor right now, subscribe to the Stoic Edge. Hit that subscribe button and join a community of men who are done drifting and have decided, once and for all, to take absolute ownership of the direction of their lives. This channel exists for you. Every video on it is a tool, a weapon, and a mirror. Use it. Now let us begin. The first habit, the morning practice of stillness and reflection. Every Stoic master understood one unbreakable truth about the human day. How you begin it determines everything that follows. Not metaphorically. Not as a nice poetic idea. Literally and mechanically. The first minutes of your waking life set the tone, the temperature, and the trajectory of the hours ahead. And yet, most men in the modern world spend those sacred first minutes doing the absolute worst possible thing, handing control of their minds to someone else. Think about what the typical morning looks like for the average man today. The alarm goes off and within seconds, before he has even fully opened his eyes, his hand finds the phone. He begins consuming news, social media, other people's opinions, other people's conflicts, other people's highlight reels, other people's emergencies. And just like that, before he has taken 5 full breaths, his mind is no longer his own. It belongs to the algorithm. It belongs to whoever engineered that feed to capture his attention and hold it as long as possible. He has surrendered the most powerful hours of his neurological day before he has even stood up. Marcus Aurelius understood the danger of this better than almost any man who ever lived. Each morning, he sat with himself before he sat with the empire. He opened his mind not to the demands of the day but to the principles that would allow him to meet those demands with grace and power. In his private writings, which we know today as the Meditations, He would remind himself who he was, what he valued, and what kind of man he intended to be in the hours ahead. He did not do this once. He did not do it when he felt inspired. He did it every single morning, as a non-negotiable act of self-construction. The practice we are talking about here is not complicated. But it requires something that many men struggle to give: stillness. Before you speak to anyone. Before you look at your phone. Before you open a browser or turn on music or check your messages, you must first spend time in deliberate, conscious quiet. This is not meditation in any mystical sense. It is simply the practice of sitting with your own mind, on your own terms, before the world gets its hands on you. Epictetus taught that the foundation of philosophy is knowing what is in your power and what is not. The morning reflection practice is where that knowing becomes alive. In those quiet minutes, you review what you are facing in the day ahead. You ask yourself with brutal honesty, what will challenge me today? Where will I be tempted to react instead of respond? Where will my ego want to get involved in something that does not serve me? What is genuinely within my control, and what must I simply accept? This is not passive resignation. It is active, intelligent preparation for a world that will not hold back its punches. Seneca wrote in his letters that we must set apart certain hours for the mind's withdrawal into itself. He was not speaking loosely. He meant it as a literal daily practice, a scheduled appointment with your own inner life that cannot be cancelled, rescheduled, or postponed by anything the external world throws at you. The Stoics treated inner work with the same seriousness that most men today treat their physical training. You would not skip the gym because you did not feel like it. You would not skip your morning meeting with your own mind for the same reason. Here is what the morning reflection practice actually looks like when you do it properly. You wake up, ideally before the demands of the household begin. You find a place of quiet. A chair by a window. A seat at a kitchen table before the rest of the family rises. A spot outdoors if the weather allows. You sit still. You breathe slowly and deliberately for several minutes, not as a spiritual exercise but as a physical act of calming the nervous system and entering a state of genuine focus. Then you think. You think about what kind of man you intend to be today. Not in abstract, feel-good terms, but in specific, precise terms. How will you speak to the people around you? How will you handle the frustration you know is coming from a particular situation at work or at home? When the traffic is bad, when the colleague is difficult, when the news is unsettling, when the body is tired, who will you choose to be? You make those decisions now, in the calm, before the heat of the moment has any chance to make them for you. That is the Stoic edge. The morning practice does not need to be long. 15 minutes is enough. 20 is better. But consistency is everything. A short practice done every single day for a year will transform your inner life more completely than a long practice done occasionally whenever you happen to feel motivated. This is what the Stoics meant when they spoke of discipline as a form of freedom. The man who disciplines himself to begin each day in stillness and reflection earns a kind of freedom that the undisciplined man can never access, the freedom of a mind that is truly his own. Do not underestimate what is available to you in those early morning hours. The brain, freshly awake and not yet saturated with the noise of the day, is at its most receptive and most powerful. The Stoics knew nothing about neuroscience, but they understood this truth intuitively through observation and practice. What you feed your mind first thing in the morning shapes your perception, your patience, your reactions, and your decisions for the entire rest of the day. Feed it philosophy. Feed it your own values. Feed it the deliberate intention of the man you are building yourself to be. There will be mornings when you do not want to do this. Mornings when the bed is warm and the day ahead feels crushing and the idea of sitting quietly with your own thoughts sounds like torture. Those are precisely the mornings when the practice matters most. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the temptation to stay in bed, to avoid the day, to sink into laziness, and he called it out for exactly what it was, a small surrender, a tiny defeat of the will that would snowball into larger defeats if allowed to stand unchallenged. The man who wins his mornings wins his life. Build this habit first. Build it before anything else. Make it sacred and make it non-negotiable, and watch what happens to every other area of your life as a result. The second habit, memento mori, the daily remembrance of your mortality. There is a practice that sounds, at first hearing, like the darkest and most uncomfortable thing a man could willingly bring into his daily life. And yet, when you understand what it actually does to the way you live, to the urgency with which you act, to the clarity with which you see what matters and what does not, you will wonder how you ever lived a single day without it. The practice is called memento mori, and it is one of the oldest and most powerful weapons in the entire Stoic arsenal. Memento mori is a Latin phrase that translates simply as remember that you will die. Not as a morbid indulgence. Not as a source of despair or anxiety. But as a clarifying force of breathtaking power. The Stoics believed, and they were absolutely right, that nothing in the human experience focuses the mind and sharpens the priorities quite like the conscious, deliberate acknowledgement that this day, this conversation, this opportunity, this moment with the people you love, will not last forever. Not because they were pessimists. Because they were realists of the highest order. Marcus Aurelius returned to this theme again and again throughout the Meditations. He wrote about the great emperors of the past, the generals and statesmen who had seemed so mighty and so permanent, and reminded himself that every single one of them was now dust. Not to depress himself. To liberate himself. Because when you genuinely absorb the fact that you, too, will die, that the clock is already running, that you are not guaranteed tomorrow or even this evening, something extraordinary happens to the way you spend your today. The small irritations stop mattering. The grudge you have been carrying against the man who wronged you 3 years ago suddenly looks different when you hold it up against the reality of your own mortality. The opportunity you have been putting off, waiting for the perfect moment that never seems to arrive, looks radically different when you understand with visceral clarity that the time you have is finite and non-renewable. Memento mori does not produce fear. In a man who practices it correctly, it produces action, clarity, intentionality, urgency without panic. Seneca was perhaps the most eloquent of all the Stoics on the subject of time and death. His letters are saturated with the awareness that time is the only truly non-renewable resource a man possesses, and that to waste it, to drift through days without intention, to postpone the life you want to live in favor of the life that is merely comfortable, is the gravest possible form of poverty. He wrote with a fire and an urgency that feels, 2,000 years later, as though he is speaking directly into your ear. You are dying, he told his friend Lucilius. Begin to live. Here is how you practice memento mori as a daily habit, not as a philosophical exercise but as a living, breathing tool. Each morning, during your time of reflection, you take one conscious moment to acknowledge the fact of your own death. You do not dramatize it. You do not linger on it with anxiety. You simply hold it clearly and honestly in your mind. I will die. I do not know when. I do not know how. But it is certain as anything in this world can be, that this life I am living will come to an end. And then you ask the only question that matters in response to that acknowledgement. Given that this is true, what should I do with today? This practice alone, this single daily moment of honest mortality awareness, has the power to reshape your relationship with time, with the people you love, with the work you are called to do, and with the procrastination and avoidance that drains so many men of their best years. The man who remembers he will die does not waste his afternoon in mindless distraction when there is something important to be done. The man who remembers he will die does not delay the conversation he needs to have with his son or his father or his oldest friend. The man who remembers he will die does not let fear of failure keep him from attempting the great thing that his heart keeps calling him toward. There is also a deeper layer to memento mori that goes beyond personal productivity, and this is where the Stoics take it in their most profound writing. When you regularly contemplate your own death, you begin to see life not as a problem to be solved or a ladder to be climbed but as a gift to be honored. Every ordinary morning becomes extraordinary when you hold it with the awareness that one morning, there will be no morning. Every meal, every conversation, every sunrise, every chance to do something good in the world carries a weight and a sweetness that the man who never thinks about death simply cannot access. He is too busy taking it all for granted. The ancient Romans had a tradition during military triumphs, when a general paraded through the streets of Rome in glory, of having a slave stand behind him in the chariot and whisper in his ear, "Remember, you are mortal." In the midst of the highest achievement, in the brightest moment of success and recognition, the reminder was deliberately introduced: "You are not a god, you will not live forever. Do not let this moment inflate you beyond your truth." That is a wisdom that has never lost its power, not in 2,000 years of human civilization, and not in the noise and distraction of the world you are navigating today. Practice memento mori every single day. Make it a cornerstone of your morning reflection. Let it season your decisions throughout the day. Let it act as the ultimate editor of your priorities, cutting away the trivial, the petty, the fearful, and the small, leaving only what is real, what matters, what lasts. This is not darkness. This is the clearest light that ancient philosophy ever produced. The third habit, the daily journal and the art of self-examination. One of the most consistent practices across the lives of every major Stoic philosopher was the habit of writing. Not writing for an audience. Not writing to publish or to be admired. Writing as a private act of self-examination, the deliberate, disciplined practice of putting words to thoughts in order to see them more clearly, to hold yourself accountable to the values you claim to live by, and to track the gap between the man you say you want to be and the man you are actually becoming through your daily choices. Marcus Aurelius never intended for the Meditations to be read by anyone other than himself. This is one of the most important and often overlooked facts about one of the most celebrated philosophical texts in human history. Those writings were his private journal, his daily record of self-examination, his ongoing conversation with his own soul about whether he was living up to the standards he had set for himself. He wrote to himself with a directness and a sternness that he apparently could not always bring to his public role as emperor. In those private pages, he called himself out, corrected himself, challenged himself, and reminded himself of the truths that had a tendency to slip away in the noise and pressure of governing the most powerful empire in the world. What does a Stoic journal practice actually look like? It is not a diary in the traditional sense. It is not a record of events, a catalogue of what happened during the day. It is something sharper and more demanding than that. It is a mirror. In the evening, or in the morning, or in both, the Stoic practitioner sits with his journal and asks himself the hard questions. Where did I fall short today? Where did I allow my emotions to run ahead of my reason? Where did I react when I should have paused? Where did I speak when I should have listened? Where did I avoid something I should have faced? Where did I treat someone in a way I would not want to be remembered for? Epictetus taught that the examined life was the only life worth living, that a man who does not regularly audit his own behavior, his own character, his own alignment between values and actions, is a man who is essentially stumbling through his days in the dark. The journal is the lamp. It brings light to the parts of yourself that are easiest to ignore, the parts that you dress up in justifications and rationalizations when they come up in conversation, but that, in the private honesty of your own pages, you cannot hide from. The journal has no reason to flatter you. It has no agenda. It simply reflects back what you actually are, as opposed to what you prefer to imagine yourself to be. Seneca practiced a version of this every evening. He wrote about examining his own day after the household had gone quiet, asking himself with genuine honesty what errors he had made in judgment, in speech, in action. And here is the critical thing he emphasized: he did this without self-flagellation. Without the kind of harsh self-judgment that collapses into shame and paralysis. The purpose was not to punish himself for falling short. The purpose was to understand himself, to catch the patterns, to see the recurring weaknesses, to illuminate the specific areas that needed further work and further attention. A surgeon does not lose his mind over a mistake. He studies it. He understands how it happened. He corrects his technique. He becomes better. The Stoic journaler approaches his own character with exactly the same clinical precision and the same genuine desire for improvement. There is something else that happens when you maintain a consistent daily journaling practice that goes beyond self-correction. You begin to develop an extraordinarily deep relationship with your own mind. Most men in the modern world are, if they are honest, strangers to themselves. They know their preferences and their habits, but they have rarely sat still long enough to examine their beliefs, their patterns, their deepest fears, their most persistent temptations. The journal forces this examination. Week after week, month after month, it builds a record, a genuine autobiography of the inner life, that becomes one of the most valuable things you will ever possess. Not because anyone else will read it, but because the man who knows himself cannot be easily manipulated, destabilized, or defeated by either failure or success. The practice of journaling also has a stabilizing effect on the emotions that the Stoics valued enormously. When something happens during the day that provokes a strong emotional reaction, anger, anxiety, grief, resentment, writing about it forces you to slow down and think. And thinking, in the Stoic framework, is the act that transforms reaction into response, impulse into choice, emotion into wisdom. You cannot write clearly about something you are still in the grip of without that writing beginning to create a small but essential distance between you and the feeling. And distance is where freedom lives. Make your journal a non-negotiable daily tool. Keep it simple. A notebook. A pen. 15 minutes at the end of the day, sitting in quiet, asking yourself the hard questions with the honesty of a man who has nothing to hide from himself, and nothing to gain from flattery. What did I do well today? What did I do poorly? What did I learn? What do I want to do differently tomorrow? What is my commitment for the day ahead? Over time, this practice will show you yourself with a clarity that is both humbling and tremendously powerful. And the man who sees himself clearly is the man who can change himself deliberately. The fourth habit, voluntary hardship and the practice of discomfort. There is a habit that requires more courage to begin than almost any other on this list, and it is also, in many ways, the most transformative of all. It is the habit of deliberately choosing hardship. Not waiting for hardship to arrive, not simply enduring the difficulties that life sends your way, but actively, intentionally creating conditions of discomfort in your daily life as a form of training for the soul. The Stoics called this practice voluntary hardship, and they took it with extraordinary seriousness. Seneca wrote about it with a passion that still jumps off the page. The practice of setting aside certain days to live in deliberate simplicity, to wear rough clothing, to eat plain food, to sleep on a hard surface, to strip away the comforts and conveniences that modern life had piled on top of the basic human experience, and asked himself, honestly, if this is what it came to, could I endure it? Could I maintain my equanimity, my character, my values, if the comfort were taken away? Could I be the same man in hardship that I am in ease? This practice is not masochism. It is not self-punishment. It is the ancient, hard-won understanding that comfort is one of the most dangerous enemies of character. Not because comfort is evil in itself, but because an unlimited diet of comfort breeds softness, breeds dependency, breeds a kind of fragility that leaves a man completely unprepared for the inevitable difficulties that life will deliver. And life will deliver them. It always does. The question is never whether difficulty is coming. The question is whether you will be ready for it when it arrives. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful man in the Roman world, chose physical hardship as a constant companion. He trained as a soldier, ate simple food, slept on a soldier's bedroll when campaigns demanded it, and refused the kind of imperial indulgence that characterized many of the emperors who came before and after him. Not because he was performing asceticism for an audience. Because he understood that the man who has never been cold does not know whether he can endure cold. The man who has never been hungry does not know whether he can endure hunger. And not knowing your own capacity for hardship is a form of weakness that no amount of intelligence or privilege can compensate for. Epictetus, who had been a slave and therefore knew hardship not as a philosophical exercise but as the literal condition of his daily existence, spoke about it from a perspective that carries enormous weight. He taught that the obstacle is not the enemy of progress, it is the material out of which progress is made. Every difficulty, every discomfort, every challenge that a man meets with equanimity and continued action is a brick in the construction of the kind of character that cannot be broken. And the man who has never voluntarily practiced hardship is the man who will be broken by the first serious difficulty that finds him unprepared. So what does this habit look like in practical terms in the life of a modern man? It looks like this. You choose deliberately and regularly, to do the hard thing rather than the easy thing when both options are available to you. You take the cold shower instead of the hot one, not because hot water is evil, but because the discipline of choosing cold when warm is available strengthens the part of you that chooses what is right over what is comfortable. You fast for a day, not because food is bad, but because experiencing hunger in a context where you have chosen it, and know it will end teaches you that you can handle the experience of not having what you want without falling apart. You exercise in a way that genuinely challenges you, that takes you to the edge of what is comfortable and pushes you past it, because the body that has been pushed and pushed and pushed past its comfort zone develops a resilience that the body coddled by ease never acquires. You choose the harder conversation over the comfortable silence. You choose to acknowledge the difficult truth rather than the soothing lie. You choose to put in the extra hour of work when the evening is calling you toward rest. Every time you choose difficulty over ease, you are making a deposit in an account that no external force can ever empty, the account of your own proven resilience. And a man who has proven his resilience to himself, through repeated practice in the laboratory of his own daily choices, carries himself differently. He walks into difficult situations with a calm that other men cannot quite explain, because they have never built what he has built. Seneca's instruction to practice voluntary hardship was not about becoming immune to pleasure or incapable of enjoying comfort. It was about ensuring that your enjoyment of good things remained free from the desperate clinging, the anxious dependency, the irrational fear of loss that characterizes the life of the man who has never learned to do without. The man who has practiced going without, who knows from direct experience that he can handle difficulty, holds his comforts lightly. He enjoys them fully when they are present, and releases them without crisis when they are not. That is not deprivation. That is freedom of the deepest kind. Build hardship into your daily practice. Make it specific. Make it intentional. Make it consistent. Start small if you need to. The cold shower is an excellent beginning point, not because it is the hardest thing you will ever do, but because it is a daily micro-practice in choosing discomfort over ease that builds the neural and psychological muscle of self-mastery. Then expand. Push your physical training harder than feels comfortable. Give up something you enjoy for a week and observe your relationship with its absence. Sleep an hour less than you want to and use that hour for something that matters. Each small act of voluntary hardship is a vote for the kind of man you are becoming, and the compound interest on those votes, paid out over months and years, is a character that stands firm when everything else is shaking. The fifth habit, the discipline of focused attention. There is a crisis in the modern world that the Stoics never had to contend with in quite the form it takes today, but that they anticipated with a precision that is frankly astonishing. It is the crisis of scattered attention. The inability, made worse by every new device, every new platform, every new demand for your mental bandwidth, to bring your full, undivided, sustained focus to bear on a single thing and hold it there long enough to do that thing well. The capacity for deep, concentrated attention is one of the rarest and most valuable things a man can cultivate in the 21st century, and it is being systematically destroyed by the very technologies that most men use without question every single day. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind takes on the color of its thoughts. He meant that the quality of your inner life, your clarity, your wisdom, your capacity for good judgment and courageous action, is directly shaped by the quality of the things you choose to give your attention to. A mind that is constantly bouncing between screens and notifications and stimuli and interruptions becomes, over time, a mind that is incapable of genuine depth. It becomes a surface. Reactive, restless, shallow, always busy, almost never truly focused. The Stoic practice of disciplined attention is, at its core, the practice of choosing what you think about, and then thinking about it fully and completely, rather than allowing your mind to be dragged in whatever direction the strongest external stimulus happens to be pulling. Epictetus opened his great work with the most fundamental distinction in all of Stoic philosophy: some things are within our control, and some are not. The clearest application of this teaching, the one with the most immediate practical power in the life of a modern man, is the control of attention. You may not control what happens around you, but you absolutely control, if you choose to exercise that control, where your mind goes. Here is the problem. The modern world has been engineered, and this is not paranoia, it is the explicit admission of the people who build these technologies, to capture and hold your attention against your will. The devices in your pocket, the apps on your screens, the feeds and notifications and endless streams of content, they are designed by teams of brilliant engineers and psychologists specifically to hijack your attention and keep it for as long as possible. They trigger the same neurological reward systems as gambling. They are designed to make the act of scrolling feel like the search for something meaningful, so that you will continue scrolling long after the search has stopped producing anything of value. The Stoic response to this is not to flee technology or to pretend it does not exist. It is to practice the deliberate, daily discipline of reclaiming your own attention as your own. This means building specific practices into your day that train the capacity for sustained, deep focus. It means doing one thing at a time with your full attention, rather than dividing your focus across 3 things simultaneously, and doing all 3 of them poorly. It means scheduling time for deep work, the kind of concentrated intellectual or creative or physical effort that produces your best results, and protecting that time from interruption with the same ferocity that a man protects his physical safety. Seneca wrote that the person who is everywhere is nowhere. He was describing exactly the condition that the average man today lives in, perpetually available, perpetually reachable, perpetually distracted, and therefore genuinely present to nothing and no one, including himself. The Stoics valued what we might today call presence, the quality of actually being fully in whatever you are doing, bringing your whole mind to bear on the thing in front of you, whether that thing is a difficult problem you are trying to solve, a conversation with someone you care about, a piece of physical work that deserves your full effort, or simply the experience of being alive in a particular moment. Practice the discipline of focused attention as a daily habit by structuring your day around blocks of uninterrupted work. During those blocks, the phone is away. The notifications are off. The door is closed. You have one task and you give it everything you have until it is done or until the block is over. This practice, repeated daily, does something that most men in the modern world have lost and desperately need. It rebuilds the muscle of sustained attention that has been eroded by years of constant distraction. It is not comfortable at first. The mind that has been trained to expect constant stimulation will rebel against the stillness of focused work. It will generate urges to check things, to look at things, to escape into something more immediately gratifying. Those urges are not commands. They are tests. Meet them with the same response you bring to physical discomfort. Acknowledge, hold firm, continue. The compound benefit of this daily practice extends far beyond productivity, as important as that is. The man who has trained his attention to be fully present, in his work, in his conversations, in his quiet moments with himself, experiences life at a depth that the distracted man simply cannot access. When you are fully present to a conversation, you hear things you would otherwise miss. You see things. You understand things. You build the kind of genuine connection that takes root and lasts because the other person can feel, unmistakably, that they have your full attention and therefore your genuine respect. When you are fully present to your own work, you produce results that surprise even yourself, because your best thinking is only available in the state of deep focus. And when you are fully present in your own daily experience, life stops feeling like something rushing past you and starts feeling like something you are actually living. This is the Stoic edge that the attention habit gives you. While the majority of men around you are dividing themselves into fragments and getting shallow returns from their shallow investment of attention, you are building the kind of depth and concentrated power that make you genuinely formidable in whatever arena you choose to operate in. The 6th habit, mastering your response, not your circumstances. There is a truth at the absolute center of Stoic philosophy, a truth so simple that it can be stated in a single sentence, and so profound that entire lives have been transformed by the genuine, practiced understanding of it. The truth is this: you cannot control what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond to it. Not sometimes. Not when you have prepared sufficiently or when the circumstances are manageable. Always. In every situation, no matter how extreme, no matter how unfair, no matter how unexpected, the power of your response belongs to you and to you alone, and no external force in the universe can take it from you unless you hand it over willingly. The Stoics called this the last human freedom, the freedom of response. And they returned to it obsessively in their writing and their lives because they understood that everything else in Stoic practice, all the other habits and disciplines and techniques, ultimately comes back to this one foundational reality. You are not responsible for the weather. You are not responsible for the economy. You are not responsible for how other people behave, for what other people think of you, for the cards that fate deals to you in any given hand. But you are 100% responsible for the man who shows up in response to all of those things. Marcus Aurelius lived this teaching in circumstances that would have crushed most men. He governed an empire for nearly 2 decades under conditions of near-constant crisis, military invasions, plague, economic instability, betrayal by people he had trusted, the deaths of people he loved. And through all of it, what stands out in his private writing is not bitterness, not despair, not the kind of wounded resentment that would have been entirely understandable given what he faced. What stands out is the steady, deliberate, practiced choice to respond to each difficulty with reason, with principle, and with the full measure of his best self. Not because he was superhuman. Because he had built the habit. Epictetus, whose entire philosophy grew out of the experience of literal enslavement, articulated the principle with the precision of a man who had been forced by circumstances to find the freedom that cannot be taken away. He distinguished sharply between what he called things in our power, our judgments, our intentions, our desires, our responses, and things not in our power, everything outside the boundary of our own mind and will. The man who pursues things outside his power, who ties his peace of mind to outcomes he cannot control, will always be at the mercy of circumstances. The man who focuses with absolute discipline on what is in his power, above all, the quality of his response, is free in the only sense that matters. Here is what mastering your response looks like as a daily habit. Every time something happens today that would normally trigger an automatic, unconsidered emotional reaction, the anger reflex, the anxiety spiral, the wounded pride, the immediate impulse to retaliate or to collapse, you practice inserting a gap. The Stoics called this gap the chrysalis, the brief but crucial space between the event and your response in which reason has a chance to reassert itself over impulse. In that gap, however small it is, you ask yourself 2 questions. First, is this within my control? Second, what response will I be proud of when I look back on this moment? These questions, practiced daily in the small irritations and setbacks of ordinary life, build a capacity that pays dividends when the serious difficulties arrive. Because they will arrive. Every man's life contains its great trials, the losses, the failures, the betrayals, the health scares, the professional crises, the relationship ruptures that shake the foundations of everything he has built. The man who has practiced the habit of mastered response in the laboratory of his ordinary days is the man who, when the great trial comes, does not fall apart. He breathes. He pauses. He thinks. And then he responds, not from the raw wound of his immediate emotion, but from the deep, practiced strength of his trained character. This is not about becoming cold or emotionally unavailable. The Stoics were not robots. Marcus Aurelius grieved. He loved. He was moved by beauty and troubled by suffering and delighted by the good qualities of the people he respected. The goal of mastered response is not the suppression of feeling but the subordination of reaction to reason, ensuring that what you do in the world is chosen by the wisest version of yourself rather than dictated by the most impulsive version. The man who masters his response is more fully human, not less, because he is operating from choice rather than compulsion, from strength rather than fear. Build this habit in your daily life by starting with the smallest provocations. The driver who cuts you off. The colleague whose comment irritates you. The unexpected complication in a plan you had prepared carefully. Each of these small moments is a training opportunity. Practice the pause. Practice the questions. Practice choosing your response instead of simply having it. And every time you succeed, every time you navigate a potentially reactive moment with calm, clear-headed intention, you make that response pattern slightly more automatic, slightly more built-in, slightly more a fundamental expression of who you are rather than a technique you are consciously applying. That is how character is built. Not in the dramatic moments. In the daily ones? The seventh habit, feeding the mind through daily reading. There is a form of poverty that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with the quality of what a man puts into his mind. The Stoics were, without exception, voracious and intentional readers. They studied not just their own school of philosophy but the full breadth of human wisdom that was available to them: poetry, history, science, the competing schools of philosophy, the accounts of great men and terrible men and ordinary men who had faced extraordinary circumstances. They believed, with a conviction that shaped every dimension of their lives, that the quality of a man's thinking is the quality of his life, and that the quality of his thinking is largely determined by the quality of the material he chooses to feed his mind. Seneca wrote that we must study good books carefully, being nourished by their wisdom. He was emphatic on one point: it is better to read a few truly great books deeply than to consume an enormous volume of mediocre material superficially. He distinguished between what he called grazing, moving constantly between books and subjects without ever penetrating deeply into any of them, and genuine study, the sustained, focused engagement with material that is genuinely worth your time and genuinely capable of improving your mind and your character. In an age of infinite content and zero patience, this distinction has never been more important. Marcus Aurelius read constantly, and the Meditations are saturated with references to the writers and thinkers who shaped his understanding of the world: the Stoics Epictetus and Marcus's teacher Rusticus, but also the historians and the poets and the philosophers of competing schools. He did not read to win arguments. He did not read to accumulate impressive references. He read because he genuinely believed, and it is hard to dispute the evidence of his life, that exposure to the best thinking that humanity has produced is one of the most reliable paths to becoming the kind of thinker, and therefore the kind of person, who can navigate complexity with wisdom rather than with mere cleverness. The daily reading habit, as a Stoic practice, has both a practical and a philosophical dimension. The practical dimension is straightforward: the man who reads consistently, who engages daily with challenging, meaningful material, builds a mind that is more agile, more informed, more capable of seeing patterns and drawing connections and making good judgments, than the man who does not. Reading, of real books, not the scrolling consumption of social media content or the passive viewing of video, requires and develops the same focused attention that we discussed in the previous habit. It trains concentration. It builds vocabulary and therefore the precision of thought. It exposes you to perspectives and experiences and ways of framing the world that you would never encounter in the ordinary daily round of your own life. The philosophical dimension is even more important. The great Stoic texts, the Meditations, Seneca's letters to Lucilius, the discourses of Epictetus, are not books you read once and then place on a shelf as trophies of intellectual accomplishment. They are books you return to, daily if possible. Because they are not primarily texts about ideas, they are texts about practice. They are the written records of men who were living these principles in the hardest possible circumstances and documenting what they found. Every reading of them, at every stage of your life, will yield something different, because you are different each time you return. The passage from the Meditations that meant nothing to you at 45 will stop you cold at 55 because the life you have lived in the intervening decade has given you the eyes to see what was there all along. Here is the reading habit as a daily practice. 30 minutes minimum. Done consistently, without the phone nearby, without the temptation to switch to something more immediately stimulating. You choose material that actually challenges you, that requires your attention, that makes demands on your thinking, that leaves you with something worth holding on to when you close the pages. Read with a pen in your hand, or with a notebook nearby. When something strikes you, a passage that lands with particular force, an idea that you want to sit with, a phrase that crystallizes something you have been thinking without quite being able to articulate, write it down. Not because you will necessarily go back to it, though you might, but because the act of writing it anchors it in your memory in a way that mere reading alone does not. Seneca was direct about the relationship between reading and living. The goal of reading philosophy is not knowledge in the abstract. The goal is transformation. A man who has read deeply in the Stoics but who has not allowed that reading to change how he walks through the world has wasted his time. The test of whether your reading is working is simple. Are you more patient than you were? Are your judgments sharper? Are you more capable of distinguishing what matters from what does not? Are you a harder man to destabilize? If the answer to those questions, over months and years of daily reading, is yes, then you are reading the right things in the right way. The books are doing what books, at their best, have always done. They are making you more fully yourself. The eighth habit: physical discipline as daily spiritual practice. The Stoics were not soft men. They were not philosophers who sat in comfortable chairs debating abstractions while leaving their bodies to decline into weakness and decay. They understood, with a clarity that modern culture is only now beginning to rediscover through neuroscience and performance research, that the body and the mind are not separate systems operating independently of each other. They are a single integrated system, and the health, strength, and discipline of one directly and inevitably shapes the health, strength, and discipline of the other. Marcus Aurelius was a warrior as well as a philosopher. He spent years on military campaigns in brutal conditions, leading from the front, enduring the physical hardships of field life alongside his soldiers. He did not merely tolerate the physical demands of military life. He chose them. He used them. He understood that the body that is regularly tested, regularly pushed past its comfort zone, regularly asked to do more than it finds easy, develops a quality. Call it resilience, call it toughness, call it what the Romans called virtus, that becomes available across every other dimension of a man's life. Epictetus was unambiguous about the relationship between physical training and philosophical practice. He taught that the man who neglects his body is not taking philosophy seriously. Not because physical perfection is the goal, it never was for the Stoics, but because the discipline required to build and maintain a strong, capable body is exactly the same discipline required to build and maintain a strong, capable character. The habits are inseparable. The man who quits on himself in the gym when the workout gets hard is the man who quits on himself in the difficult conversation, in the challenging decision, in the moment that requires him to stand firm under pressure. Here is what physical discipline looks like as a daily Stoic practice. It means moving your body every single day with genuine intention. Not the minimum required to maintain basic health. The kind of sustained, challenging physical effort that tests you, that asks you to reach past what is comfortable, that develops real strength and real endurance rather than the comfortable illusion of fitness. It means lifting heavy things, or running long distances, or training in a martial art, or doing some combination of physical practices that regularly take you to the place where your body wants to stop, and your will must decide whether it will. The daily choice to push through physical discomfort, to finish the last set, to run the last mile, to hold the position when everything in you is screaming to release, is one of the most powerful daily votes a man can cast for the kind of person he is. Every single time you choose to continue when your body wants to stop, you are exercising and strengthening the faculty that the Stoics prized above all others, the will. The capacity to choose differently than your impulses are demanding. And that faculty, built in the gym or on the trail or on the training mat, shows up everywhere else. It shows up in the moment when you want to lash out but choose to stay calm. It shows up in the moment when you want to quit a difficult project but choose to see it through. It shows up in every corner of your life, because you have built it at its deepest and most physical root. Seneca wrote that we must harden our bodies with cold and heat and thirst and hunger and such other pressures. He was not advocating recklessness. He was advocating the regular, intentional use of physical challenge as a way of proving to yourself, again and again, that you are harder and more capable than your comfort would have you believe. Every man who has pushed through a genuinely difficult physical training session and reached the end of it knows the specific quality of satisfaction and self-respect that follows. It is different from the satisfaction of an intellectual accomplishment or a social success. It is rawer, more fundamental, more cellular. It is the satisfaction of the body having been asked to be its best and having delivered. Add to this the mounting evidence from modern neuroscience that regular vigorous physical exercise directly enhances the brain functions most associated with clear thinking, emotional regulation, focus, and resilience, the exact functions that Stoic practice is designed to develop. The Stoics did not need scientific studies to understand this relationship, because they lived it. But we have the additional gift of knowing why it works at the biological level, which should give every man who takes his mental and philosophical development seriously even stronger reason to treat physical training not as an optional add-on to his daily routine but as one of its non-negotiable foundations. If you are part of the Stoic Edge community, you already know that this channel is built on the belief that real transformation is always total. It touches the body and the mind and the character as a single integrated whole. Subscribe to the Stoic Edge today if you have not yet, because everything we produce here is designed to help you build yourself at every level, and the physical dimension of that building is one we will continue to explore in depth. Make your body a daily practice. Train it hard. Train it consistently. Treat it as a reflection of your values, because in the most direct possible sense, it is. The 9th habit, silence as strategy, stillness as power. In a world that never stops talking, the man who masters the art of silence is the most powerful man in any room. This is not a modern insight. The Stoics wrote about the strategic and philosophical power of silence with an intensity that makes clear they understood it as one of the highest expressions of self-mastery and one of the most revealing markers of a man's character. The impulse to fill every silence with speech, to constantly share every thought and every opinion and every reaction, is, in the Stoic view, a form of weakness, a failure of self-control that reveals more about a man's neediness and insecurity than any of his words ever could. Marcus Aurelius, who operated in one of the most socially complex environments imaginable, the Roman imperial court, where words were weapons and silence was often survival, prized the capacity to listen over the compulsion to speak. He wrote repeatedly about the importance of speaking only when speech improves upon silence, a standard that, if applied honestly to any given day of ordinary social interaction, would eliminate an extraordinary proportion of what most people say. Not because most of what people say is evil, or even wrong. Simply because most of it is unnecessary, unconsidered, and produced by habit and impulse rather than by thought and intention. Epictetus was, if anything, even more emphatic about the discipline of speech. He taught that the student of philosophy should be immediately identifiable not by what he says but by what he does not say, by the capacity to sit with discomfort without filling it with words, to absorb insult without responding to it, to resist the social pressure to have and share an opinion on every topic that arises in conversation. He went so far as to suggest that the man who speaks frequently and at length about philosophy without living it is actually in a worse position than the man who has never heard of it, because he has immunized himself against genuine transformation with the false satisfaction of sounding wise. Here is what practicing silence as a daily habit actually means. It means raising your standard for what deserves your words. Before you speak in any situation, in a meeting, in a conversation, in a social gathering, you ask yourself, is what I am about to say true? Is it useful? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If it does not clear at least 2 of those bars, it may not deserve to be said at all. This is not about being cold or withholding or antisocial. It is about the quality of your presence in the world. The man who speaks rarely but speaks well is listened to. The man who speaks constantly is tuned out, even when he occasionally says something worth hearing, because the noise-to-signal ratio is too low for anyone to bother sorting through. The practice of silence is also deeply connected to the practice of focused listening, which is, in the Stoic understanding, one of the most important things a man can do both for his own development and for the quality of his relationships. When you are not busy preparing your next comment, not occupied with the mental performance of being perceived as interesting or knowledgeable, something remarkable happens. You actually hear what the other person is saying. Not just the words, but the meaning underneath the words. The concern behind the statement. The need beneath the request. The fear beneath the anger. Great listeners are rare in the world and valued everywhere they appear, and they become great listeners by mastering the discipline of silence. Seneca wrote that silence is the greatest gift a man can give to his own mind. He meant that the interior noise of constant mental chatter, constant judgment, constant commentary, constant planning and worrying and reacting, is as draining and as damaging to clear thinking as the exterior noise of a world that never stops demanding attention. Practicing external silence, sitting in quiet, resisting the urge to fill space with sound, choosing stillness over stimulation when both are available, trains the internal equivalent. The man who has learned to be quiet on the outside begins, over time, to develop the capacity for genuine stillness on the inside. And genuine interior stillness is the condition in which the deepest thinking, the wisest judgment, and the most accurate self-knowledge become available. Practice silence as a daily discipline in these specific ways. When you feel the impulse to speak, pause for 3 seconds. In that pause, ask whether what you are about to say deserves to be said. Take 1 meal per day in deliberate silence, without music, without screens, without the radio, simply eating, tasting, present to the experience and your own thoughts. Spend time daily in spaces without manufactured sound. Walk without headphones. Drive without the radio on. Sit in your yard or your study and let the natural quiet do what it does. Over time, these practices will build in you a relationship with silence that most men in the modern world have never experienced. A relationship of ease and even deep pleasure with the condition of stillness that is, the Stoics would say, the natural home of a mind that knows itself. The 10th habit, acting with purpose, virtue, and absolute intention every single day. We have come to the final habit, and in many ways it is the one that makes all the others meaningful. Because all of the reflection, all of the journaling, all of the physical discipline, all of the silence and focused attention and voluntary hardship, none of it ultimately matters unless it produces something in the world. Unless it results in a man who acts deliberately, consistently, and with the full alignment of his values and his behavior. Who does not merely contemplate virtue but lives it, in his decisions, his commitments, his relationships, and his daily engagement with the world that surrounds him. The Stoics were not theorists. They were practitioners. And the measure of a philosopher, in their framework, was never the sophistication of his ideas or the eloquence of his writing. It was the quality of his action. Specifically, the degree to which his actions in the world reflected the values he claimed to hold, and the consistency with which he held to those values when holding to them cost him something. That cost, the willingness to act from principle when it would be easier and more comfortable to act from self-interest or fear, is what the Stoics called virtue, and they held it as the only genuine good. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man's life is the expression of his deepest convictions. Not his stated convictions. Not the values he claims in conversation or writes in a journal. The values that show up in his actual daily behavior, the way he treats the person who can do nothing for him, the way he handles the moment when no one is watching, the way he responds when his principles are tested by real cost and real consequence. That is where character lives. Not in the philosophy, as beautiful as the philosophy is. In the life. Epictetus taught that the purpose of all Stoic practice is a single thing: to become a person of complete integrity, a person whose inner life and outer life are in perfect alignment, who thinks and speaks and acts from the same place. Not the public self and the private self pulling in different directions, as they do in the lives of so many men who have learned to perform virtue rather than to practice it. A single, unified self, clear in its values, consistent in its actions, indifferent to the opinion of those who would prefer it to be otherwise. Seneca wrote that virtue is not an event that happens to a man. It is a practice that a man chooses, repeatedly, every single day, in every situation that tests it. And every situation tests it. The man who claims to be patient but loses his temper when dinner is late is not a patient man. He is a man who is patient when patience is easy. The man who claims to be honest but softens his truth when honesty is costly is not an honest man. He is a man who is honest when it costs him nothing. Real virtue, Stoic virtue, is the kind that holds under pressure, that shows up not in the comfortable moments but in the hard ones, and that does so not because of external accountability or social reward but because the man who holds it has made a genuine decision, renewed daily, that this is who he is. What does acting with purpose, virtue, and intention look like as a daily habit? It looks like this. Every morning, in your reflection, you clarify your purpose for the day. Not a productivity goal, though goals matter. A character intention. Today, I will be patient with the people who challenge my patience. Today, I will tell the truth in every conversation, without softening it in ways that serve my comfort at the expense of their need to hear it. Today, I will do the work that I have committed to, fully and without cutting corners, whether anyone is watching or not. Today, I will treat every person I encounter with the same basic respect and dignity that I would want to be treated with if our positions were reversed. Then you go through your day carrying those intentions with you, not as a performance but as a genuine commitment. And at the end of the day, in your journal, in your evening reflection, you review your performance honestly. Not to punish yourself for falling short, but to understand where you fell short and why, and to recommit to the standard for tomorrow. This is the Stoic life in its most practical, most daily, most non-spectacular form, not the grand gesture, not the dramatic transformation, not the moment of sudden enlightenment. The quiet, steady, relentless daily practice of trying to be, in each ordinary day, the best possible version of the man you have decided to be. Marcus Aurelius knew, better than anyone who has ever held power, that the purpose of all his practice was not the accumulation of personal achievement, or the securing of his historical legacy. It was simpler than that, and more demanding, to be a good man. To do the right thing, in each moment, to the best of his ability, with the full weight of his attention and his care. To serve the people entrusted to him. To tell the truth. To act from principle rather than self-interest. To hold to his values when holding to them cost him something real. He was not always successful. The meditations are full of evidence that he knew how often he fell short. But the daily intention, renewed each morning, examined each evening, lived with as much consistency as human fallibility allows, that intention was never abandoned. And it is the sustained intention, practiced across a lifetime, that produces the kind of character that history remembers and that the people who knew Marcus Aurelius in his actual daily life recognized as something genuinely rare and genuinely admirable. Act with purpose today. Not tomorrow. Not when the conditions are better or the timing is right or the feeling is stronger. Today. In the next hour. In the next conversation. In the next decision, however small. Because the man you are becoming is being built, right now, in the ordinary moments of this ordinary day. And every time you choose to act with virtue, with honesty, with discipline, with kindness, with courage, with the full weight of your best self, you lay another stone in the foundation of the man that you are building. That man, built stone by stone and day by day through the practice of these 10 habits, is unstoppable. Not because nothing will try to stop him, but because he has become the kind of man who cannot be stopped by anything other than his own choice. Bringing it all together, the Stoic life as a complete practice. We have covered 10 habits, each rooted in the ancient wisdom of the Stoics, each proven across thousands of years of human struggle and human striving, each capable, in its own right, of producing significant change in the quality of a man's life. But here is what makes them truly powerful, not each one alone, but all of them together, practiced simultaneously as a complete daily architecture of intentional living. The morning practice of stillness sets the tone. Memento mori gives the day its urgency. The journal provides honest self-examination. Voluntary hardship builds resilience. Focused attention ensures that your best self shows up fully in everything you do. Mastered response ensures that circumstances do not derail you. Daily reading continually elevates the quality of your thinking. Physical discipline keeps your instrument, the body through which all of this practice must be lived, sharp and capable. Silence gives depth and dignity to your presence. And purposeful action translates everything else into the actual substance of a life well lived. These are not 10 separate items on a checklist. They are 10 dimensions of a single integrated practice. The practice of building yourself deliberately, daily, into the most capable, the most grounded, the most genuinely powerful version of what a man can be. The Stoics did not call this a self-improvement project. They called it the philosophical life. And they were convinced, with the full weight of their own experience as evidence, that it was the only life genuinely worth living. Marcus Aurelius knew that this kind of life requires something that most people are unwilling to give: consistency over time. Not the burning inspiration of a transformative weekend seminar. Not the white-hot motivation of a New Year resolution. The slow, steady, unremarkable, daily showing up, the 10-year commitment, the 20-year commitment, the lifetime commitment to the practice of becoming, one ordinary day at a time, the man that your deepest nature is calling you to be. He wrote that you are under no obligation to become the same man you were yesterday. Every morning is a genuine chance to begin again. Not to erase what came before, but to choose more clearly, more deliberately, more fully than the day before what you are going to do with the day that has been given to you. Here is what the Stoics never promised, and what this channel will never promise you. They never said this life is easy. They never said the habits are comfortable, that the discipline is pleasant, that the path of philosophical self-mastery is smooth or free of setbacks and regressions and long stretches of apparent stagnation. What they said is that it is worth it. That the man on the other side of sustained, honest, daily Stoic practice, the man who has been forged by these 10 habits over years of committed work, is a man who possesses something that the comfortable, the soft, the undisciplined, and the distracted can never take from him. He possesses himself. Fully. Completely. In the deepest possible sense. And that is what unstoppable actually means. Not that nothing will ever go wrong. Not that life will not test you in ways that bring you to your knees. Not that you will never fail or doubt or struggle. It means that no matter what comes, you will not be broken by it. You will not be carried away by it. You will not lose yourself in it. Because you have built yourself with enough deliberateness and enough depth that the foundation holds, whatever the storm. That is the Stoic edge. That is what this channel is here to help you build. And it starts today, in the habits, in the hours, in the ordinary unremarkable decisions of this ordinary unremarkable day. Closing, the invitation and the commitment. If you have stayed with this video from the beginning, something is clear: you are not the average man. The average man does not spend this kind of time with content that demands this kind of honest self-examination. He is looking for comfort, for entertainment, for the quick fix that promises transformation without the discipline. You are looking for something real. And that means you are exactly where you belong, in this community, on this channel, among men who have decided that the examined life is the only life worth living and that the work of building themselves is the most important work they will ever do. If you are not yet subscribed to the Stoic Edge, do that right now. Not because we need the numbers, though your support genuinely matters to the growth of this community, but because you deserve a consistent source of content that meets you at the level of seriousness with which you are approaching your own life. Every video on this channel is built for you. Built with the depth and the rigor and the practical specificity that the Stoics themselves brought to everything they produced. Built for the man who is done drifting and has made the decision, the real decision, to take absolute ownership of who he is and who he is becoming. Subscribe. Share this video with the man in your life who needs to hear it. Because one of the most Stoic things you can do is invest in the community of people around you who are also trying to build themselves into something great. Marcus Aurelius understood that the philosophical life is not a solitary undertaking. It is lived in the world, among people, in relationship with others who are also trying and also struggling and also reaching for something higher than the ordinary. That is what the Stoic Edge is. A community of men who are reaching. The 10 habits we have explored today are your tools. They are ancient, they are proven, and they are waiting to be picked up. The morning reflection. The practice of memento mori. The daily journal. Voluntary hardship. Focused attention. Mastered response. Daily reading. Physical discipline. Strategic silence. Purposeful action. Pick them up. Begin today. Not Monday, not next month, not when the timing feels better. Today. This hour. This moment. Because the Stoics knew, and now you know, that the only time that genuinely belongs to you is the present one. You were not built to drift. You were built to be forged. And the forge is here, and it is lit, and it is waiting. Welcome to the Stoic Edge. The discipline of time, a Stoic expansion on each habit. Before we go deeper into each habit with additional layers of understanding, there is one thread that runs through every single practice we have discussed, and it deserves its own full examination. That thread is time. The Stoics were, among all the ancient schools of philosophy, the most urgently preoccupied with the question of time, not in the abstract, cosmic sense, but in the fiercely personal sense of what you are doing with the specific hours and days of your one irreplaceable life. Seneca's essay on the shortness of life is one of the most powerful pieces of writing in human history, and its central argument is simple enough to state in a single sentence: life is not short, we make it short by squandering it. The man who complains that he did not have enough time to build the life he wanted, in Seneca's view, is not the victim of a cruel universe. He is the victim of his own choices, of the hours handed over to triviality, to distraction, to the passive consumption of other people's lives and other people's opinions, to the endless postponement of the genuine living that he always imagined was waiting somewhere in the future. This is not a comfortable teaching, but it is an enormously liberating one, because it places the entire responsibility, and therefore the entire power, back in your hands. You are not waiting for more time. You have the time. The question is what you choose to do with it. And the 10 habits we have explored in this video are, each one of them, a specific, practical answer to that question, a way of ensuring that the hours of your day are genuinely yours, genuinely used, genuinely invested in the direction of the man you are building and the life you are creating. Marcus Aurelius wrote that each day should be lived as though it might be the last, not in the hedonistic sense of abandoning all restraint, but in the precise, Stoic sense of bringing to each day the full weight of your attention and your intention, as though there were no tomorrow to defer the important things to. The man who lives like this does not feel that his life is rushing past him. He feels that he is inside his life, fully, with his whole self, meeting each moment with the genuine presence that transforms ordinary time into extraordinary experience. Epictetus taught his students that time is the most personal and most precious thing a man possesses, more personal than his body, which can be enslaved, and more precious than his possessions, which can be taken. Time is the raw material of your life. It is being spent right now, at a fixed rate, in a fixed direction, regardless of whether you choose to spend it intentionally or not. The man who understands this, who feels it not as a philosophy class abstraction but as a living, present, daily reality, is the man who stops wasting his hours on things that do not matter and begins investing them with the fierce, loving deliberateness of a man who knows he is working with a finite supply. Each of the 10 habits we have discussed is a specific form of such investment. The morning reflection is the investment of 30 minutes in the clarity and intention that will multiply the value of the remaining hours. The journal is the investment of 20 minutes in the honest self-knowledge that compounds across years into genuine wisdom. The reading is the investment of half an hour in the quality of your thinking that pays dividends in every decision you make for the rest of your days. Physical training is the investment of an hour in the body that must carry all your other investments into the future. And each of these investments, made consistently and honestly over time, produces the only return that the Stoics ever cared about, a life that was genuinely and fully lived. Do not let this video end without making one concrete decision about how you are going to reclaim 1 hour of your day from distraction and invest it in one of these practices. Not eventually. Today. This is the Stoic invitation, and it has not changed in 2,000 years. Begin now, with what you have, from where you are. The life that you want is not waiting for conditions to be perfect. It is waiting for you to decide. The habit of morning reflection, going deeper. We spoke earlier about the morning practice of stillness and reflection, and because it is the foundational habit on which all the others depend, it deserves further attention, further depth, and a more complete picture of how to make it genuinely powerful rather than merely perfunctory. The danger with any daily habit is that it becomes mechanical, a box you check rather than a practice you actually do. The Stoics were acutely aware of this danger, and Epictetus in particular was merciless in calling out the difference between the man who performs the external trappings of philosophy and the man who actually practices it. He was not interested in a man who could quote Stoic precepts accurately. He was interested in whether those precepts were genuinely alive in the man's daily choices and daily character. The morning reflection practice is exactly the place where this test gets run every single day. A truly powerful morning reflection practice has several specific components that elevate it beyond the generic instruction to simply sit quietly for a few minutes. The first is the perspective practice, looking forward at the day ahead with clear eyes. You examine, in advance, the specific situations and interactions that are likely to test you. The difficult meeting. The conversation with the person who challenges your patience. The task you have been avoiding because it is uncomfortable. You do not just acknowledge that these things are coming. You think through them carefully, in advance, asking yourself how a man of genuine wisdom and character would handle each one. You essentially rehearse the day in your mind, not to control its outcome, that is not within your power, but to prepare the quality of your response. The second component is the gratitude practice, which the Stoics would not have called gratitude in the modern therapeutic sense, but which they practice nonetheless in the form of a more fatty, the love of fate, the genuine appreciation for the life that has been given rather than constant longing for the life that has not. Each morning, as you sit in your reflection, you take a moment to acknowledge, with genuine feeling rather than rote recitation, some of the specific things in your life that you would not willingly trade away. The health you still have. The people who matter to you. The freedoms you possess. The basic fact of being alive in a world that is, for all its difficulties, also genuinely remarkable. This is not positive thinking in the shallow sense. It is an honest audit of your situation that prevents the mind from defaulting, as it tends to do when left unattended, toward complaint, toward scarcity thinking, toward the corrosive comparison between what you have and what you imagine others to have. The third component is the intention-setting practice, stating clearly to yourself the specific character qualities you are choosing to lead with today. Not goals in the sense of outcomes you are trying to produce. Character intentions in the sense of qualities you are committing to embody. I will be patient. I will tell the truth. I will do what I said I would do, fully and without shortcuts. I will bring my full attention to every conversation. I will treat every person I encounter with basic respect and basic dignity. These are not resolutions in the ambitious New Year sense. They are daily recommitments to the values that make you the man you are building yourself to be. Seneca wrote that a man who has not decided who he wants to be every morning will find himself shaped by whatever happens to him during the day. The morning reflection is the act of deciding. It is the daily renewal of the covenant between the man you are and the man you are becoming, a covenant that no one can witness except you, and no one can uphold except you, and that no one can break except you. The Stoic understanding of failure and setback. No honest account of the Stoic daily practice is complete without a full and unflinching discussion of failure. Because failure is not the exception in this practice. It is built into it. It is an inevitable, recurring, deeply instructive feature of the landscape of any man who is seriously attempting to build himself into something better than what he currently is. The Stoics had a word for the process of making progress in philosophy, prokope, which translates roughly as advancement, or making headway. But the Stoic understanding of prokope was never linear. It was never a clean upward trajectory from ignorance and weakness toward wisdom and strength. It was a process that included, necessarily and inevitably, setbacks, regressions, moments of complete surrender to the very impulses you had been working to master, days and weeks of what felt like going backward instead of forward. And the Stoics' response to this was not despair. It was the same quality they applied to every other form of difficulty, equanimity. Marcus Aurelius was remarkably honest in the Meditations about his own failures of character. He wrote about losing his temper when he had resolved to stay calm. He wrote about acting from vanity when he had resolved to act from principle. He wrote about the specific social and political failures that haunted him, relationships damaged, opportunities missed, judgments made with less wisdom than the situation deserved. He did not edit these confessions out of his private writing. He left them in, raw and honest, because the writing itself was the act of processing and moving forward, and to have softened the honesty would have been to defeat the purpose. What the Stoics understood that modern self-help culture frequently misses is that the goal is not perfection. The goal is direction. The man who is imperfect but moving in the right direction, who falls short and gets back up and tries again with slightly more wisdom than he had before the fall, is living the philosophical life in the truest sense. The man who is waiting until he feels confident enough, prepared enough, perfect enough to begin, that man is not living the philosophical life at all. He is living the life of perpetual preparation, which is another name for perpetual avoidance. Epictetus was particularly direct about this. He told his students that the person who has never been shaken by a temptation has not tested himself. The person who has never fallen short of his own standard does not yet know where his standard actually stands. It is precisely the moment of failure, the moment when your resolve cracked, when the impulse won, when the comfortable choice was made instead of the right one, that contains the most valuable information about where your genuine work still needs to happen. The Stoic practitioner approaches his own failures with the curiosity of a scientist rather than the self-condemnation of a judge. What happened here? Why did it happen? What does this reveal about the specific weakness I need to address? And then, what is my commitment going forward? Seneca wrote that the great men were not those who never fell, but those who never stopped rising. This is not a platitude. It is a precise description of what the philosophical life actually looks like in practice, a life of rising. Rising from the ordinary to the disciplined. Rising from the reactive to the responsive. Rising from the drift to the direction. And rising, again and again, from the inevitable falls that every man who is genuinely attempting something difficult will experience throughout the course of a life honestly lived. When you fall short of your daily habits, when the journal does not get written, when the morning reflection is skipped, when the emotional reaction wins and the thoughtful response loses, do not waste a moment in the kind of shame spiral that produces paralysis rather than correction. Simply ask yourself the two questions that the Stoics always come back to: what happened, and what will I do differently? And then do it differently. Tomorrow, if today is already gone. Later today, if the day is still salvageable. The door to recommitment is always open. The Stoics never locked it from the outside. Only we can lock it from the inside by deciding that we are too broken or too far gone to try again. And the man who makes that decision has not encountered a Stoic idea in his life, or he would know that decision is always, without exception, wrong. The role of community in Stoic practice. The popular image of the Stoic philosopher is a solitary figure, a lone man in a barren landscape, self-sufficient to the point of needing nothing and no one from the outside world. This is one of the most persistent and damaging misconceptions about Stoic philosophy, and it is worth addressing directly because it can lead men who are drawn to Stoic ideas into a form of practice that is fundamentally impoverished and unnecessarily hard. The Stoics were not hermits. They were not advocates of isolated self-sufficiency taken to the extreme of social withdrawal. Marcus Aurelius governed the most complex social organization in the ancient world. Seneca wrote his most essential wisdom in the form of letters, intimate, engaged, deeply relational letters, to a friend. Epictetus ran a school. All of the major Stoics understood, with great clarity, that human beings are social creatures and that the philosophical life is not lived in isolation from other people but in the midst of them, through them, and to a significant extent because of them. Marcus Aurelius opened the Meditations with a long section in which he catalogued, with genuine warmth and gratitude, the specific qualities and lessons he had received from specific people in his life: his grandfather, his father, his teachers, his friends, his wife. He understood that he had been shaped, in every significant way, by his relationships. Not just by his private practice. By the community of people who had shown him what goodness looked like in the flesh, who had modeled the virtues he was trying to practice, who had challenged him when he needed to be challenged and supported him when he needed to be supported. The Stoics valued what they called the community of the good, the fellowship of people who are genuinely trying to live well, who hold each other to high standards, who share the journey of philosophical practice with honesty and mutual accountability. This is not the fellowship of people who merely admire Stoic ideas. It is the fellowship of people who are daily doing the work, who are waking up and reflecting, and journaling, and training, and practicing silence and mastered response and all the other disciplines, and who are willing to be honest with each other about how it is going. This is what the Stoic Edge community is building. Not a fan page. Not an audience. A genuine fellowship of men who are taking this seriously, who are doing the work, who are supporting each other through the inevitable difficulties of a life genuinely committed to growth and self-mastery. If you are watching this channel, you are already part of something real. Subscribing deepens that membership. Sharing this content extends the fellowship to men who are still looking for it. Every man who finds this channel and decides to take it seriously is another member of the community of the good that the Stoics valued so highly. Seneca wrote that it is better to seek one good mind than to know many ordinary ones, that the quality of the people you spend your time with has an enormous and largely underestimated effect on the quality of your own thinking and your own character. This is not snobbery. It is a practical observation about how human minds work. We become like the people we surround ourselves with, whether we intend to or not, whether we are aware of it or not. The man who spends his time with people who are cynical, undisciplined, and directionless will find that quality pulling at him. The man who spends his time, even virtually, through content and community, with people who are serious, disciplined, and directed toward genuine excellence will find that quality pulling at him in the opposite direction. Choose your community deliberately. Choose it the way the Stoics chose their teachers and their friends, not for entertainment or for social comfort, but for the specific, practical influence that quality people have on the quality of your character. The Stoic Edge is here to be that influence in your life. Subscribe today and bring someone with you who is ready to do the work. Stoic wisdom for the difficult seasons of life. Every man's life contains its seasons of genuine difficulty, not the ordinary friction of a busy day or the minor frustrations of life not going as planned, but the deeper, harder seasons of real loss, real failure, real suffering. The death of someone you love. The collapse of a marriage or a business or a health condition that has defined your sense of yourself. The experience of betrayal by someone you trusted completely. The long dark stretch when everything you have worked for seems to be falling apart simultaneously, and there is no clear path through and no guarantee of what awaits on the other side. The Stoics had a great deal to say about these seasons, and what they had to say is not easy or comfortable. But it is real. And real is what you need in a difficult season, not false comfort, not empty reassurance, not the kind of cheerful optimism that sounds right in a motivational video but disintegrates on contact with genuine grief or genuine loss. Real. What the Stoics say is this: the difficult season is not an interruption of your life. It is your life, not the exception to it. The experience of loss and difficulty and genuine suffering is built into the human condition at the most fundamental level, and the man who goes through his days pretending otherwise, who organizes his entire life around the avoidance of difficulty, is not living wisely. He is living in denial. And when the difficulty arrives, as it inevitably does, he will be entirely unprepared for it, because he has spent all his time and energy building a life that was designed to keep it out rather than a character that can hold up within it. Marcus Aurelius lost children. He fought wars he did not want to fight. He governed in times of plague and famine and political betrayal. He did all of this without the luxury of stepping back from public life to process his grief in private. He did it in full view, under constant scrutiny, with the empire watching. And the record he left of how he did it, the honest, searching, sometimes anguished record of the Meditations, is one of the most valuable documents in human history precisely because it does not pretend that this was easy. It shows us a man genuinely struggling, genuinely suffering at times, and genuinely choosing, again and again, to meet that suffering with the qualities that his practice had built in him: reason, equanimity, purpose, and the steady conviction that a man's character, whatever is taken from him, remains his own. Seneca's approach to loss and grief was similarly unflinching. He wrote to friends who had suffered the deaths of children, the end of marriages, the loss of everything they had worked to build, and his letters to them are among the most profound pieces of consolatory writing ever produced. He did not tell them that their loss was not real. He did not tell them to be grateful and move on. He acknowledged the reality and the weight of what they had experienced, and then he offered what he genuinely believed, and what his own experience had confirmed, was the only sustainable foundation for surviving and eventually transcending such losses: the quality of your inner life, which no loss can touch. Epictetus, who had been a slave and who understood suffering not as a philosophical problem but as a daily lived reality, taught his students that the question in any difficult circumstance is always the same: what is being asked of me here? Not what has been taken from me. Not why is this happening. Not how do I make this stop. But what is being asked of me? Because the Stoics believed, with a conviction born of direct experience, that every difficulty carries within it a demand for virtue, a specific call to wisdom, or courage, or justice, or temperance, and that the man who can hear that call and answer it is not destroyed by his difficulties but built by them. This is not a teaching that makes loss painless. It is a teaching that makes loss meaningful. And meaning, in the darkest seasons of a man's life, is what makes the difference between being broken and being forged. The habit of daily Stoic practice, the 10 habits we have explored in this video, are what ensure that when the dark season comes, you are not starting from zero. You are drawing on months and years of built character, built resilience, built capacity for equanimity in the face of what you cannot control. You are not alone with your suffering in an empty room. You are a man who has prepared for this moment, whether you knew it was coming or not. Build your practice now, in the ordinary days. Build it consistently. Build it without waiting for a crisis to give you the motivation. Because the crisis will come, and when it does, what you have built in the ordinary days will be the most important thing you have ever made. The Stoic and the world: engagement without attachment. There is a misunderstanding about Stoic philosophy that deserves to be addressed directly, because it prevents some men who are drawn to these ideas from applying them in the way they are genuinely intended. The misunderstanding is this: that to be Stoic is to be detached from the world. To not care. To be cold, emotionally unavailable, indifferent to the outcomes of your efforts and the well-being of the people you love. To float above ordinary life in some kind of philosophical bubble, untouched and unmoved by anything that happens. This is not Stoicism. It is a caricature of it, and it is a harmful one, because it takes a philosophy of engaged, courageous, fully present living and turns it into a philosophy of withdrawal and emotional absence. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most engaged men who ever lived. He cared deeply, about Rome, about the people under his care, about his family, about justice, about the quality of his own character. What the Stoics taught was not that you should stop caring about outcomes. It is that your inner peace, your equanimity, your capacity to function at your best, should not be held hostage by outcomes. There is a profound difference between those two things, and missing that difference leads to either misapplying the philosophy or rejecting it entirely. The Stoic principle of preferred indifference is the key to understanding this correctly. The Stoics distinguished between things that are genuinely good, virtue, character, wisdom, and things that are preferred but not genuinely good in the deepest sense: health, wealth, success, the well-being of the people you love. They did not say that health is not worth wanting or that success is meaningless. They said that you should pursue these things fully and with your whole effort, while holding them lightly enough that if you lose them, your fundamental well-being, your character, your equanimity, your ability to function and to continue, is not destroyed. This is the highest form of engagement with the world. Not the frantic, desperate, outcome-dependent engagement of the man who needs things to go a certain way in order to be okay. The calm, full, deliberate engagement of the man who brings everything he has to every endeavor and then receives whatever comes with equanimity, because he has located his well-being in what he can always control, the quality of his effort, the integrity of his character, rather than in what he cannot. Seneca wrote that the Stoic practitioner should move through the world like a ship through water, fully present in it, engaging with it completely, leaving a wake behind him, but not being sunk by whatever storms the sea sends. This is not detachment. This is the deepest possible form of engagement without the desperate clinging that distorts judgment and produces panic when things do not go as planned. Apply this understanding to your daily habits. Practice them with full engagement, and full commitment. Care about the results. Work hard. Try with everything you have. And then, whatever the results are, receive them with equanimity and a clear eye toward what comes next. The man who practices this, who engages fully and holds outcomes lightly, is not a cold man. He is the warmest and most fully present man in any room, because he is genuinely there, genuinely giving, genuinely invested, without the anxious, self-protective distance that desperate attachment to outcomes inevitably produces. The philosophy of virtue, the Stoic North Star. Everything in Stoic philosophy, every habit, every practice, every teaching, every insight, orbits around a single central concept: virtue. Not virtue in the watered-down, moralistic sense that the word has acquired in modern usage. Virtue in the original, full-blooded Greek and Roman sense of the word, arete in Greek, virtus in Latin, which means excellence. Specifically, the excellence of human character expressed in action. The Stoics identified 4 core virtues that they believed encompassed the whole of excellent human character: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. And they were insistent, in a way that can feel almost confrontationally demanding to a modern reader, that these 4 virtues were not separate qualities to be pursued independently, but a single, integrated whole. You cannot be truly wise without also being just, because wisdom without justice is mere cleverness in the service of self-interest. You cannot be truly courageous without wisdom, because courage without wisdom is recklessness. You cannot be truly temperate, truly self-disciplined, truly in control of your appetites and impulses, without the other 3 to give that self-control direction and purpose. Marcus Aurelius returned to these 4 virtues constantly throughout the Meditations, not as abstract ideals but as practical daily guides. When a decision presented itself, he would measure it against them. Is this wise? Is this just? Does it require courage? Am I temperate in how I am pursuing it? This is not a complicated framework. But it is an incredibly powerful one, because it provides a universal standard of evaluation that is not dependent on cultural fashion, on the approval of other people, or on the shifting sands of external circumstance. The virtues are what they are, in every situation and every era, and the man who uses them as his North Star cannot be fundamentally lost, no matter how complicated the terrain becomes. Epictetus taught his students that the whole of philosophy reduces to a single practical question that must be asked and answered in every situation: what is the excellent, the virtuous, the genuinely good thing to do here? Not the profitable thing. Not the popular thing. Not the comfortable thing. The genuinely good thing. And then, this is the critical part, to do it immediately, without waiting for external validation, without requiring the approval of anyone else. Simply because it is right, and because the man who does what is right is the man who is building the only thing worth building, a life of genuine integrity. The 10 habits we have explored in this video are, each one of them, expressions of one or more of these 4 core virtues. The morning reflection is an act of wisdom, the daily practice of applying clear thinking to the conduct of your life. The practice of memento mori is an act of courage, the willingness to look clearly at an uncomfortable truth in order to live more fully. The journal is an act of justice, the daily holding of yourself to the standard of honesty and self-accounting. Voluntary hardship is an act of temperance, the deliberate restraint of the comfort-seeking impulse in service of a higher quality of character. Mastered response is the daily exercise of all 4 virtues simultaneously. Physical discipline is courage and temperance in their most immediate, bodily form. Silence is wisdom. Purposeful action is virtue itself, the living expression of everything else. When you build these habits daily, you are not collecting techniques. You are constructing a character. And character, as the Stoics never tired of reminding themselves and anyone who would listen, is the only thing in a human life that is fully within your control and fully worth having. Everything else, wealth, reputation, health, success, the opinions of other people, these are what the Stoics called preferred indifference. Nice to have, worth pursuing within reason, but not the source of genuine human flourishing and not the loss of any of them a genuine catastrophe. Only virtue, only the quality of your own character, determines whether your life is genuinely good. And only your daily habits, the 10 we have examined today, and all the others that follow from a life genuinely committed to Stoic practice, determine the quality of your character. The Stoic approach to anger, pride, and the shadow self. Among all the emotions that the Stoics wrote about with the greatest urgency, anger stands alone. Not because it is the most destructive, though it is extraordinarily destructive, but because it is the most immediately dangerous to the man who experiences it. Anger, in the Stoic understanding, is the emotion that most completely hijacks reason, that most reliably converts a wise and principled man into a reactive, impulsive one, and that most efficiently destroys in a few seconds what years of careful relationship building have created. Seneca wrote an entire treatise on anger, De Ira, that remains, more than 2,000 years after it was written, one of the most penetrating and practically useful analyses of this emotion ever produced. His central argument is that anger is never justified in the terms that the angry person believes it to be justified, because anger distorts perception so thoroughly that the judgment of the angry person cannot be trusted. The man who believes his anger is righteous and proportionate and fully warranted by the circumstances is, almost without exception, wrong, because the very state of anger has already corrupted his ability to evaluate the circumstances accurately. This does not mean that the Stoics counseled passive acceptance of genuine injustice. Marcus Aurelius was willing to fight wars, to impose consequences, to remove people from positions of power when their conduct demanded it. What the Stoics counseled was that these responses, when they were genuinely necessary, should be made from a state of calm reason rather than from the heat of anger. The general who deploys his forces from a position of clear strategic thinking produces a better outcome than the general who deploys them from a position of blind rage, even if the military objective is the same. The practical daily habit here is the pause, the deliberate, practiced insertion of space between the provocation and the response that gives reason a chance to evaluate the situation before emotion commands the action. We discussed this in the context of mastered response, but it bears repeating in the specific context of anger because anger is fast. It does not wait politely for you to consider your options. It arrives with the speed and force of a reflex, and if you have not built the habit of the pause in the ordinary daily practice of small irritations, you will not have access to it in the moment of genuine provocation. Practice the pause every single day in the small things. When the traffic angers you, practice the pause. When the irritating comment lands in the conversation, practice the pause. When the unexpected complication derails your plan, practice the pause. Each practice makes the next one slightly easier, slightly more automatic, slightly more genuinely built into who you are rather than something you are consciously applying. And the man who has built this, who can pause between provocation and response even when the provocation is significant, possesses a quality that most men never develop and that makes him formidable in every arena where composure matters. Pride, not the healthy self-respect that the Stoics valued, but the bloated, self-aggrandizing pride that the ancient Greeks called hubris, was another emotion that the Stoics regarded with deep suspicion. Marcus Aurelius wrote repeatedly about the danger of allowing success, recognition, and the admiration of others to inflate the ego to the point where it loses touch with reality. He had particular reason to be vigilant about this, given that he was quite literally the most powerful and most admired man in the known world. The temptation to believe that this status reflected some fundamental superiority of essence, rather than the combination of fortunate birth and practiced virtue, was constant and must have been, at times, overwhelming. That he resisted it as consistently as he did, that the meditations are so remarkably free of ego and self-congratulation, speaks to the genuine depth of his daily practice. The Stoic antidote to pride is the same as the antidote to almost every excessive emotional state: perspective. The perspective of memento mori, which reminds you that your achievements and your status are temporary. The perspective of history, which shows you that the most celebrated men of every previous age are now forgotten by nearly everyone. The perspective of philosophical humility, which acknowledges that wisdom is always partial, always growing, always discovering new areas of ignorance that it had previously not been aware of. The man who keeps this perspective alive in his daily practice cannot sustain the kind of corrosive pride that isolates him from other people and distorts his judgment. He remains grounded. He remains teachable. He remains, in the best sense of the word, human. Building your Stoic daily practice. The complete framework. We have covered immense ground in this video, and as we move toward the close, it is worth gathering everything we have discussed into a single, coherent, practical framework that you can actually use as a blueprint for your daily life. Because philosophy that does not translate into daily practice is not philosophy. It is entertainment. And the Stoic edge is not here to entertain you. It is here to transform you. Here is the complete daily Stoic practice framework, drawn from everything we have explored today. Your morning begins with 30 minutes that belong entirely to you and your inner life. Before the phone. Before the demands of the household. Before the news and the notifications and the expectations of other people. You sit in stillness and you reflect. You review the day ahead. You identify the specific challenges and opportunities that are coming. You rehearse your responses to the situations that will test you. You state clearly your intention for the kind of man you will be in the hours ahead. And you take one moment to hold the practice of memento mori, to acknowledge your mortality and let it sharpen your relationship with the day that has been given to you. This is your morning. Guard it with your life. Your day moves forward with the habit of focused attention, bringing your full self to whatever you are doing, resisting the pull of distraction with the same steady firmness that you bring to physical discomfort during training. When situations arise that provoke a reactive response, you practice the pause. You insert the gap. You ask, is this within my control? What response will I be proud of? You speak with intention and listen with full presence. You choose the harder thing over the comfortable thing when both are available. You treat every person you encounter with the basic dignity that virtue demands, not because they have earned it but because you have chosen it. Your midday or late afternoon contains your physical training, the daily investment in the body that carries everything else. You push past comfort. You finish what you begin. You use the physical challenge as the direct, immediate, visceral practice of the will that extends into every other area of your life. Your evening contains 30 minutes that belong to your journal and your review. You sit with honest questions. Where did I do well today? Where did I fall short? What do I understand now that I did not understand this morning? What is my commitment for tomorrow? You write with the ruthless honesty of a man who has nothing to gain from flattering himself, and everything to gain from seeing himself clearly. You close the journal and you close the day, genuinely and cleanly, without carrying the unfinished business of today into the sleep that is preparing you for tomorrow. And somewhere in the daily hours, in the morning reflection, or in a dedicated block of focused time, or in the quiet of your evening, you read. You read from the Stoics, from the great philosophers and historians and thinkers who have understood something worth understanding about the human condition. You read with a pen in hand. You read with the genuine intention to be changed by what you find. You carry what you find with you into the world and let it do its work on the quality of your thinking and the quality of your action. This is the daily Stoic practice. It is not glamorous. It does not produce immediate, visible results that you can post about or show off. It works the way that all genuine character building works, slowly, compoundingly, invisibly in the short term and unmistakably in the long one. The man who maintains this practice for a year is meaningfully different from the man who began it. The man who maintains it for 5 years is unrecognizable in the best possible sense, not because he has performed some external makeover, but because something in the foundation of who he is has been genuinely and permanently rebuilt. This is what the Stoic edge is here for. Not the quick hit of motivation that fades by Thursday. The slow, deep, genuine transformation that lasts a lifetime. Subscribe now, stay in this community, return to these ideas regularly, and let the compound interest of consistent daily practice deliver the man you have always known you were capable of becoming. The final word, the man who cannot be stopped. If you are watching this video and the ideas we have explored today are new to you, if the Stoics are names you have heard but works you have not yet read, if this kind of content is unfamiliar but something in it is resonating with a hunger you have felt but not been able to name, this final section is written directly for you. It does not matter how old you are when you begin this practice. Marcus Aurelius was well past youth when he wrote his most powerful reflections. Seneca wrote his most essential wisdom in the final years of his life, when he knew that death was close and felt the urgency of leaving something genuinely useful behind. Epictetus had lived as a slave before he became a free philosopher. He built his character not despite his circumstances but within them, using them as the raw material of his transformation. The starting point does not determine the destination. The decision to start does. It does not matter how far you feel from the man you want to be. The gap between who you are and who you are becoming is not a source of shame. It is a source of purpose. Every man of genuine character who has ever lived started somewhere humble, somewhere imperfect, somewhere marked by the errors and laziness and self-deceptions of a life not yet fully examined. The examination, honestly begun and honestly sustained, is what changes the trajectory. Not the starting position. The direction. It does not matter how many times you have tried before and fallen short. The Stoics would tell you, with genuine compassion and without a trace of sentimentality, that falling short is not failure. Abandoning the practice is failure. Falling short and returning again, maintaining the intention across the inevitable setbacks and regressions, that is not weakness. That is exactly what the philosophical life looks like in the real world. Marcus Aurelius fell short of his own standards constantly. He told himself so, in writing, in pages that were never meant to be read by anyone else. And then he got up the next morning and tried again. The most important thing you can do right now, today, in this moment, is simple. Choose one of the 10 habits we have discussed and begin it tomorrow morning. Not all 10, that is the path to overwhelm and eventual abandonment. 1. The morning reflection is the natural starting point, because it is the habit that supports all the others. 15 minutes. A quiet place. Your own honest thoughts about the day ahead and the man you intend to be in it. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is the beginning of everything. Subscribe to the Stoic Edge right now. Every video on this channel is a step on this path, a deeper exploration of the ideas, the practices, the challenges, and the rewards of the philosophical life. We are building something here that is genuinely useful to men who are serious about becoming their best, and we are building it with the depth and the rigor and the honest difficulty that the subject deserves. You belong here. The man you are becoming belongs here. The Stoics believe that every man, without exception, has within him the capacity for genuine excellence. Not the popular, social media version of excellence, the highlight reel, the performance, the curated image of success. Real excellence. The excellence of a man who knows himself, who governs himself, who acts from his deepest values with consistency and courage and the kind of unshakable inner authority that can only be built the way the Stoics built it, one habit, one day, one honest choice at a time. That excellence is waiting for you. It has always been waiting for you. The only question is whether you are ready to do the work of claiming it. The forge is lit. The work is here. And so are you. Welcome to the Stoic Edge. The 10 habits revisited, what they build in the long run. We have spent this entire video building a detailed picture of 10 daily habits and why each one matters. But there is a larger picture worth painting before we close. A picture of what these 10 habits produce over not days and weeks but over months and years of sustained, honest daily practice. Because the Stoics were always thinking long. They were not optimizing for the next quarter. They were building a life. The morning reflection practice, done daily for a year, does something that is almost impossible to describe to someone who has not experienced it but immediately recognizable to someone who has. It produces a quality of self-knowledge that changes the entire texture of daily experience. After a year of daily deliberate reflection, you know yourself. Not in the shallow, conversational sense of knowing your preferences and your personality type. In the deep sense of knowing your patterns, the specific situations that trigger your worst responses, the recurring temptations that find the same vulnerabilities every time, the specific fears that have been quietly driving decisions you thought you were making freely. That knowledge is power. Not power over other people. Power over yourself. And power over yourself is the only form of power that the Stoics ever valued. The daily practice of memento mori, sustained over years, reshapes your relationship with time in ways that are permanent and transforming. Men who have practiced this consistently report, and the evidence of the Stoic writings supports this, that the ordinary details of daily life acquire a quality of richness and presence that they simply did not have before. The meal with a friend. The walk in the evening air. The conversation with your son or your father or your oldest companion. These things do not have to be extraordinary to be experienced as extraordinary when you are holding them with the genuine awareness that they are finite, that this specific version of this specific moment will never occur again, that you are receiving something real right now and that the receiving deserves your full presence and your full gratitude. The journal, kept honestly over years, becomes one of the most valuable possessions you will ever have. Not as a historical record, though that is interesting. As a mirror that shows you, with complete honesty and complete precision, who you actually were at different stages of your journey, where you struggled, where you grew, where the same weakness showed up again and again before you finally found the key to addressing it, where the unexpected breakthroughs came and from what direction. The man who reads his own journals from 3 years ago with the wisdom he has accumulated in the intervening time sees himself and his development with a clarity that would have been simply unavailable to him at the time. That clarity is worth more than any external achievement. Voluntary hardship, practiced consistently, does something to a man's relationship with his own limitations that nothing else can replicate. It teaches him, through direct experience rather than theory, that his actual limits are much further out than his comfort zone suggested. That the discomfort he was avoiding was not a wall, it was a door. And on the other side of that door is not just physical toughness or mental resilience but a deep, cellular confidence in his own capacity to handle whatever comes. This is not arrogance. It is not the performance of toughness that insecure men put on for an audience. It is the quiet, earned certainty of the man who has tested himself and knows, from the inside, what he is made of. Focused attention, built as a habit over years, becomes something close to a superpower in a world where genuine concentration is vanishingly rare. The man who has trained his attention through daily practice of sustained focus can engage with the most complex problems, the most demanding creative work, the most nuanced relational dynamics with a depth that most people around him simply cannot access. He is not smarter. He is more present. And presence, in every domain of human endeavor, is what separates adequate performance from genuinely great performance. Mastered response, practiced daily for years, produces a man whose composure is not a mask but a foundation. He is not calm because he has suppressed his emotions. He is calm because he has, through years of daily practice, built a relationship with his own emotional life that is characterized by awareness and choice rather than by automatic reaction. He feels things fully, joy, grief, anger, love, fear, but he decides what to do with what he feels rather than being commanded by it. That capacity, in the relationships and the decisions and the crises of a full life, is invaluable beyond calculation. Daily reading, sustained for years, builds a mind that is genuinely richer, genuinely more capable of sophisticated thought, genuinely more equipped with the frameworks and the perspectives and the accumulated human wisdom that make excellent judgment possible. The man who has read the Stoics deeply, not once but repeatedly, returning to the same texts at different life stages and finding new meaning in the same passages, carries a kind of philosophical companionship through his daily life that is both practically useful and deeply sustaining. Marcus Aurelius was never really alone in his most difficult moments, because the voices of Epictetus and the other teachers he had absorbed were genuinely present in his thinking, offering the perspective and the principle that the moment demanded. Physical discipline, maintained across decades, produces not just a body that is stronger and more capable than the average, but a mind that has been repeatedly reminded, at the cellular level, of its own capacity for choosing what is difficult over what is easy. The 60-year-old man who has trained consistently since his 40s carries himself with a quality of physical confidence and vitality that his peers who stopped training years ago simply do not possess. But more than that, he carries the evidence of his own consistency in his body, the living, daily proof that he is the kind of man who keeps his commitments to himself, who does not quit when things get hard, who shows up for the work even when the motivation is not there. That evidence matters. It speaks to him, every time he looks in the mirror, in the language of demonstrated character rather than mere aspiration. Silence, practiced over years, eventually transforms from a discipline you apply into a quality you inhabit. The man who has spent years choosing silence over noise, depth over distraction, genuine listening over the performance of listening, develops a quality of presence that other people feel without being able to explain. They experience being around him as restful rather than draining. They find themselves saying more to him than they intended because they feel genuinely heard in a way they rarely experience elsewhere. His words, when he does speak, carry more weight because they are rare and because the people who know him have learned that he does not speak without having thought. That is a quality of presence that makes a man remembered and trusted in ways that no amount of charisma or volume can produce. And purposeful action, chosen daily across years, eventually ceases to be a practice you do and becomes simply who you are. The man who has chosen, day after day, to act from his values rather than from his impulses, from courage rather than from fear, from genuine care for others rather than from self-interest, does not eventually have to think about this. It becomes automatic. Not in the sense of being mechanical or unconscious, but in the sense of being genuinely expressive of a character that has been thoroughly and irreversibly built. The actions that flow from a character built over years of Stoic practice are not performances. They are simply what this man does, because they are simply what this man is. This is the long-run promise of the 10 habits. Not a highlight reel. Not a moment of triumph. A life. A genuine, fully lived, internally governed, externally engaged, deeply purposeful human life, the kind that the Stoics called the good life and that most men, somewhere in the quiet of their most honest moments, know they were built for and have not yet fully claimed. The legacy you are building. There's one final dimension of the Stoic daily practice that deserves to be spoken about directly and honestly, because it is one that many men in the modern world have either never considered or have considered and then quickly buried under the more immediate concerns of daily survival and daily ambition. That dimension is legacy. Not legacy in the self-aggrandizing sense of building a monument to yourself that future generations will be compelled to admire. The Stoics were deeply skeptical of that kind of ambition, and Marcus Aurelius's meditations on the fate of even the greatest historical figures, their works forgotten, their names unmemorable to subsequent generations, their achievements rendered trivial by the passage of time, should permanently cure any man of the fantasy that fame or historical recognition is a worthy goal of a human life. Legacy in the Stoic sense is something smaller and infinitely more real. It is the quality of influence that your actual character, lived daily over the full course of your life, has on the people who are genuinely close to you. The son who watches his father navigate difficulty with equanimity and learns, from that watching, that difficulty can be navigated with equanimity. The colleague who sees how you handle pressure and finds in that example the evidence that the thing they are afraid of doing is actually possible. The friend who comes to you in his darkest hour because he has watched you over years of genuine acquaintance and concluded, correctly, that you are the kind of man whose counsel he can trust. The community of people who feel the gravitational pull of a man who is genuinely what he appears to be, consistently and without pretense, and who are subtly drawn toward their own better selves by the proximity of his example. This is the legacy that the 10 habits build. Quietly. Slowly. Without announcement or performance. The man who maintains his daily Stoic practice over the full course of his life, who builds these habits into his daily architecture and sustains them through the seasons of ease and through the seasons of genuine hardship, becomes, over time, the kind of man whose presence in the lives of the people around him is a genuine gift. Not because he is trying to be a gift. Because character, genuinely built and genuinely lived, is inherently generous. It gives something to everyone who comes near it, simply by being what it is. Marcus Aurelius was surrounded by people who were made better by his example, not because he performed virtue for an audience but because he actually practiced it, and the practice was visible in every dimension of how he moved through the world. His sons who were educated in his methods. His generals who took his calmness under pressure as permission for their own. His subjects who experienced the reign of a man who genuinely cared about justice and used power for something other than its own perpetuation. All of this was the legacy of the daily practice. Not the grand achievements, though they were real. The daily, patient, genuine, unspectacular showing up. That showing up, your daily showing up, in these 10 habits, for the full length of your remaining life, is the greatest gift you will ever give to the people who share that life with you. And it is the most authentic expression of what the Stoic philosophical life, at its best and truest, has always been about, not the construction of an impressive personal brand, but the patient, humble, daily building of a genuinely good human being who makes the world around him, in however small and local a way, better than it would have been without him. Build the habits. Do the work. Show up every day. Not for the highlight reel. For the legacy. For the people who will be shaped by what you build. For the man in the mirror who deserves to see someone he genuinely respects. For the life that is waiting for the version of you that only this practice can produce. The Stoic Edge exists to walk that path with you. Every video, every teaching, every idea we explore together on this channel is a step on the same journey, the journey toward the man that Marcus Aurelius pointed toward, that Epictetus described, that Seneca lived and urged others to live. A man of genuine excellence. A man of genuine character. A man who can look clearly at his life, his choices, his habits, and his impact and say, with honest pride and without pretense, I lived this. I tried. I got back up when I fell. I kept building. I chose, as often as I could, the harder right thing over the easier wrong one. And I became, in the end, not perfect, never perfect, but genuinely, unmistakably, unshakably myself. If that man is the man you are building, and by the fact that you are here, and that you have stayed through this entire video, I believe he is, then subscribe to the Stoic Edge right now and join the community of men who are building him alongside you. Like this video so that it reaches the men who need to hear it. Share it with someone whose potential you believe in. And return here, again and again, as the journey continues and deepens and reveals new territory that the man you are today has not yet been able to see. The forge is lit. The work is here. And the man you are becoming is worth every single day of building him. Welcome to the Stoic Edge. The ancient Stoics and the modern man, why this wisdom belongs to you. There is a question that some men ask when they first encounter Stoic philosophy, and it deserves a direct and complete answer. Why should I, a man living in the 21st century, with all its technologies and all its complexities and all its radical differences from the ancient Roman world, take advice from philosophers who have been dead for 2,000 years? It is a fair question, and the answer is not simply that the Stoics were smart or historically significant. The answer is something more specific and more powerful than that. The problems that the Stoics were solving are identical to the problems you are facing today. Not similar. Identical. Marcus Aurelius, living in the most powerful empire in the ancient world, surrounded by sycophants and flatterers, managing a court full of political maneuvering and backstabbing, governing millions of people whose needs and demands constantly conflicted with each other, fighting wars he did not choose on borders thousands of miles from home, dealing with the deaths of people he loved and the betrayals of people he trusted. He was navigating a landscape of human challenge that any man reading these words would immediately recognize. The specific scenery was different. The fundamental human dynamics were not. The anger that threatens to hijack your judgment in a difficult meeting is the same anger that threatened to hijack the judgment of Roman senators. The fear of failure that makes you hesitate before a bold decision is the same fear of failure that paralyzed ambitious men in every era of human history. The temptation to choose comfort over discipline, the pull of vanity and the hunger for external approval, the difficulty of maintaining genuine equanimity in the face of genuine loss. These are not modern problems with modern solutions. They are the permanent features of the human condition, and the men who solved them most effectively, in the most demanding circumstances, left their solutions written down in texts that have survived for precisely the reason that great solutions always survive, because they work. The Stoics were not writing for posterity. They were solving real problems in real time, under conditions of genuine pressure. Marcus Aurelius was not composing a philosophical treatise for future readers to admire. He was working through the daily challenges of governing an empire with his soul intact, and he was writing what was actually helping him do that. Seneca was not performing wisdom for an audience. He was writing to a friend he genuinely cared about, sharing the practices that were genuinely sustaining him through one of the most dangerous and turbulent periods of his life. Epictetus was not building a philosophical brand. He was a teacher, in the most direct and practical sense, trying to give his students the tools they would need to navigate a world that was not going to spare them just because they were good people. That is why this wisdom belongs to you. Not because it is ancient, and therefore impressive. Because it was earned, the hard way, in the same school that you are enrolled in, the school of actual human life, with its losses and its pressures and its constant demand that you decide, again and again, who you are going to be in response to what the world is handing you. The Stoics passed their exam. Their writings are the exam notes, passed down through 2 millennia to the men who are sitting the same exam today. Use them. They were left for you. On the relationship between Stoicism and faith. Many of the men who find their way to the Stoic edge come from backgrounds of religious faith, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, or other traditions that have shaped their understanding of the world and their sense of purpose and responsibility. And a question that sometimes arises for these men is whether Stoic philosophy is compatible with their faith, or whether embracing one requires setting aside the other. The answer, in the experience of countless men who have lived deeply in both traditions, is that they are not only compatible but mutually enriching. The Stoics were not atheists in any modern sense, though their theology was different from the traditions of the Abrahamic faiths. They believed in a rational, ordered universe governed by a divine principle they called the Logos, a principle of reason and providence that runs through all things and to which the wise man aligns himself through his daily practice of virtue and reason. This is not so distant from the understanding, found across many faith traditions, that the good life is one lived in alignment with a divine order that transcends individual preference and individual fear. More practically, the daily disciplines of Stoic practice, reflection, honest self-examination, gratitude, the cultivation of virtue, the practice of treating every human being with dignity and respect, are deeply resonant with the daily disciplines of most serious religious traditions. The morning prayer and the morning Stoic reflection are not the same thing, but they are doing much of the same work, orienting the day toward what genuinely matters, anchoring the self in something deeper than the immediate pressures of external circumstance, making a daily choice about what kind of person you intend to be in the hours ahead. What Stoicism offers to the man of faith that his faith tradition may not always provide in the same form is a set of very specific, very practical, psychologically sophisticated tools for the daily work of character building. The Stoics were, among other things, extraordinarily good psychologists. They understood the mechanics of emotion, judgment, and habit with a precision that modern psychology has largely confirmed and extended. Their techniques for managing reactive emotion, for building focused attention, for examining and correcting character through daily journaling and reflection, these are tools that work, in a very practical sense, regardless of what theological framework you hold. A man of deep Christian faith who adds Stoic daily practice to his existing spiritual practice typically finds that both are strengthened and deepened by the combination. There is no conflict worth worrying about here. The Stoics were, at their best, pointing toward the same things that every wisdom tradition has pointed toward: the good life, the virtuous life, the life of genuine service and genuine integrity and genuine presence in the world. The path they map to get there is unusually specific, unusually practical, and unusually well-tested. Walk it alongside whatever other path your deepest convictions have given you. They will not pull you in opposite directions. They will lead you to the same destination from complementary angles. What separates the man who starts from the man who sustains? The hardest part of any genuine change in habit and character is not the beginning. The beginning is, in many ways, the easiest part: the excitement of a new commitment, the fresh motivation of a new understanding, the energy of the moment when something you have heard or read or seen lands with genuine force and you think, "This is what I have been looking for." That energy is real. But it has a shelf life. And the question that separates the men who genuinely transform from the men who simply pass through a period of inspired intention before returning to their previous patterns is this: what do you do when the energy is gone? The Stoics had a very clear answer to this question, and it is both the most demanding and the most liberating thing they have to say on the subject of habit and character. What you do when the energy is gone is exactly what you did when the energy was present. You do the practice. Not because you feel like it. Not because the motivation has returned. Because you have made a decision, and the decision does not require renewal every morning to remain in force. The man who has decided to build the morning reflection into his daily practice does not redecide every morning. He decided once, and the decision stands until he deliberately reverses it. This is the Stoic understanding of commitment, and it is fundamentally different from the motivational culture's understanding of commitment. In the motivational culture, commitment is something you feel, a fire in the belly, an excited energy, a sense of purpose that animates everything you do. When the fire dies down, as fires always do, the commitment is presumed to have weakened or ended. The Stoics had no patience for this understanding. They would have called it an excuse, a convenient way of allowing your comfort to override your will by attaching the continuation of your practice to the presence of a feeling that is, by its nature, temporary and unreliable. Real commitment, in the Stoic framework, is not a feeling. It is a decision, followed by action, followed by more action, regardless of whether the feeling is supporting the action or not. The cold shower that you take when you do not want to take it is worth more, in terms of character building, than the cold shower you take when you have talked yourself into genuine enthusiasm for it. Because the former is a test of will, of the capacity to choose what you have decided over what you feel, and the latter is simply following your inclination. Marcus Aurelius understood this with the clarity that comes from years of governing a vast empire where the luxury of doing only what he felt inspired to do was simply not available to him. He wrote about the discipline of continuing, of getting up and doing the work of the day even when the day ahead was crushing and the body was tired and the motivation was nowhere to be found. He was not a robot. He was a man who had made a decision about what kind of man he intended to be, and who honored that decision even when honoring it cost him something. Build your commitment to these 10 habits the same way. Make the decision once, clearly and seriously, from the deepest part of yourself that genuinely understands what is at stake. Not a New Year's resolution. A genuine, considered, fully adult decision about the direction of your life and the kind of man you are building. And then let that decision carry the practice through the mornings when you do not want to reflect, the evenings when you do not want to journal, the sessions when you do not want to train, the conversations when you do not want to choose the harder right thing over the easier wrong one. The decision carries you when the feeling cannot. That is what real commitment is. That is what the Stoics meant by discipline. And that is what will make the difference, in the long run, between the man who reads a philosophy video and the man who builds a philosophical life. Subscribe to the Stoic Edge. Come back for every new video. Bring your honest intention and your willingness to be challenged and your genuine desire to become more than you currently are. This community is here for you. The wisdom of the Stoics is here for you. The practice is here for you. All that remains is the decision, and the daily honoring of that decision, one habit, one day, one ordinary extraordinary morning at a time. The Stoic Edge, what this channel is building with you. Before this video ends completely, it is worth saying something clearly and directly about what the Stoic Edge is and what it is trying to do in your life, because the men who get the most from this channel are the men who understand not just the content but the purpose behind it. This channel was built for men who are somewhere between where they are and where they know they could be. Men who are not broken, who are functional, who are capable, who have built real things and done real things in the world, but who feel, in the quieter moments of honest self-assessment, that they have not yet become fully what they were built to become. Men who sense the gap between the life they are living and the life they are capable of living, and who have not yet found a community, or a framework, or a daily practice that is serious enough, demanding enough, and genuine enough to bridge that gap. The Stoics never wrote for men who had already arrived. They wrote for men who were on the way. Every one of them, Marcus Aurelius with his empire, Seneca with his wealth and his influence, Epictetus with his freedom and his school, was on the way. The practice never ends. The examination never concludes. The building of character is not a project with a completion date. It is a lifelong commitment, renewed each morning, honored each evening, expressed in the daily choices that no one sees but that constitute, in aggregate, the actual substance of who you are. That is what the Stoic edge is building with you. Not a destination. A practice. Not a final version of yourself that you will achieve if you follow enough steps. An ongoing, deepening, increasingly genuine engagement with the work of being the man you are capable of being. Every video we produce is one more step in that ongoing work, one more examination of an idea, a habit, a challenge, or a teaching that can make your daily practice richer, more honest, and more powerfully expressive of the life you are choosing. If you have not subscribed yet, this is the moment. Do it now. Not because subscribing will change your life by itself, it will not. But because the commitment it represents, the decision to stay in this conversation and continue doing this work, is the kind of small, daily vote for the man you are becoming that the Stoics valued above all grand gestures. The grand gesture is easy. The daily showing up is hard. And it is the daily showing up that builds everything that lasts. Marcus Aurelius wrote, near the end of the Meditations, something that stands as perhaps the simplest and most complete summary of everything the Stoic practice is asking of you. Do what nature requires. Get up and go to work. This was not a minimal aspiration. In the context of everything that he had written about nature, about reason, about virtue, about the soul's calling toward excellence, and the mind's capacity for genuine wisdom, do what nature requires meant, become fully what you were made to be. Not partially. Not when convenient. Fully. Every day. As completely as your current capacity allows, and then slightly more than that, tomorrow and the day after. Do what nature requires. Wake up and reflect. Acknowledge your mortality and use it. Journal honestly. Choose difficulty. Focus completely. Master your response. Read deeply. Train hard. Be silent with intention. Act with purpose and virtue in every ordinary moment of every ordinary day. Do all of this not because someone is watching, not because you will be rewarded, not because the world will notice or care, but because this is what it means to be fully alive and fully human and fully the man that the best version of you is capable of becoming. The Stoic edge is here every step of the way. Subscribe. Stay. Do the work. And welcome, again and for the last time in this video, to the only forge that has ever produced a genuinely unstoppable man, the forge of daily, deliberate, honest, courageous Stoic practice. The Stoic edge. Forged in silence. Built to last. A final meditation, the ordinary day as the battlefield. The Stoics understood something about the nature of greatness that cuts directly against the grain of how modern culture talks about transformation and achievement. Modern culture is obsessed with the extraordinary moment, the breakthrough, the peak experience, the dramatic turning point that divides a man's life into before and after. It loves the story of the single decisive day when everything changed, when the rock bottom was reached and the upward turn began, when the vision arrived with such clarity and force that it reorganized everything that followed. The Stoics were not dismissive of such moments. They happened, and they mattered. But they were deeply, almost stubbornly insistent on something that the dramatic moment's story always obscures. The extraordinary moment is only as valuable as the ordinary days that follow it. The vision that is not translated into daily practice is not a turning point. It is an interesting experience. The rock bottom that produces a week of inspired change followed by a gradual drift back to the previous patterns is not a transformation. It is a cycle. The real work, the work that actually produces a different man, happens in the ordinary days. The Tuesday morning when nothing is particularly wrong but nothing is particularly inspiring either, and you sit down for your reflection anyway. The Thursday evening when you are tired and the journal feels like one more obligation, and you open it anyway. The Saturday when the training session seems pointless and the habit of going anyway is the entire point. These are not the dramatic moments of the Stoic story. They are the substance of it. They are what the practice actually is, stripped of all romanticism and all performance, in its bare and genuine form. Marcus Aurelius did not write the Meditations because he was having extraordinary days. He wrote them because he was having ordinary ones, full of the same friction and tedium and minor frustrations and recurring temptations that fill the ordinary days of every man in every era. And in those ordinary days the practice was what kept him on course, not inspired and electric and full of the fire of new commitment, but steady and honest and consistent, like water carving a canyon. Water does not carve a canyon through force or intensity. It carves it through persistence, through showing up every single day in the same place and doing the same work, for as long as it takes. You are the water. The canyon you are carving is the life you are building. And every ordinary day that you show up, every ordinary morning that you reflect, every ordinary evening that you journal, every ordinary training session and ordinary careful reading and ordinary choice of the harder right thing over the easier wrong one, each of these is the water doing its work. You may not see the canyon forming. You will rarely feel the drama of transformation in these moments. But the canyon is forming. Slowly, silently, and with a certainty that no single dramatic day can match. Trust the ordinary days. Respect them. Show up for them with the same seriousness that you would bring to the extraordinary ones, because in the end, they are the extraordinary ones. They are the ones where the actual building happens, where the actual you is being carved into something real. This is the final gift of the Stoic philosophy to the man who takes it seriously, not the drama of transformation, but the deep, quiet, patient satisfaction of a man who knows he is doing the work, every day, without requiring the applause of an audience, or the fire of inspiration to sustain him. He is sustained by the practice itself, by the integrity of his own showing up, by the man he is slowly, inevitably, becoming. That man is waiting for you in the ordinary days that lie ahead. Go meet him. One habit, one morning, one honest choice at a time. The Stoic edge will be here every step of the way. The Stoic edge, forged in silence.